U.S. President Donald Trump, he was on social media defending Wayne Gretzky following the mounting criticism from Canadian fans over Gretzky's ties to Trump and the United States.
Yeah, his wife Janet also took to social media sharing that Gretzky's sadness with this criticism. We're going to take a look at this with Michael Mulvey. He's an assistant professor with the University of Ottawa, the Telfer School of Management. Good morning, Michael. Really great to have you on our show and to talk about this because it's fascinating. This really seems to be something a lot of people want to weigh in on. And I'm curious what you think might have been the turning point here, because it seemed like with Gretzky supporting Trump, returning to the White House, there wasn't too much of a response depending on, your politics. But it seemed to me it was the Four Nations game where people started to share their concerns and their criticism.
Yeah, well, I think a big part of it is what is the basis of his reputation? And for over 60 years, pretty much, it's been hockey. He's been an icon of hockey, not just in Canada, but internationally. He's on the world stage, and he's been a big champion of that and a great ambassador for the sport, competing for Team Canada many times. And so hockey was where it's at, but it seems like it's taking other dimensions more recently.
At this moment where he gave the thumbs up to the USA bench on the way in as the honorary captain or ambassador, whatever it was, for Team Canada that night, a lot of Canadians, I think, felt rubbed the wrong way. No Canadian garb on that night as well here. Professor, would you agree that it seems to me part of this, too, is we actually haven't heard from the great one himself? We've heard from his wife. We've seen Donald Trump sort of back him up and continue to tweet about him. We also understand Bobby Orr said some things as well. But we're actually not hearing from Gretzky. Do you find Gretzky he's kind of in this pickle between a rock and a hard place?
I think it's very on brand for Gretzky. And so one is, I remember Gretzky always being surrounded by enforcers that took care of the dirty work for him. And that's partly because the essence of his brand is he's a good guy. He's a good guy who cares about his family. He's a good guy who cares about the game. He's above the politics of fanatics, basically. He's a fan of the sport. He's the guy in 1987 who invited the Soviets to his basement to crack open a beer after a very tough tournament. And so he was instrumental in opening up the sport internationally and getting some of the great talent worldwide into the NHL. And so to me, that's very consistent. But you got to be a bit of an old timer. You got to be somebody who's watched the games throughout the 80s and 90s to understand that this is very Gretzky.
I just keep thinking about how he's considered such an icon in our country, true, right? I mean, especially in Edmonton, they worship him. I believe there are streets named after him. So, so I guess going into this, is it because people who are watching this kind of go back and forth, they just feel, given that he is Canadian, that, he's so respected here, he could be doing more to improve our relationship with the U.S. at this really difficult time and the threat of tariffs looming?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because it says more about the consumers or the citizens that are making commentary. They're trying to shape the brand into something that they wish. They're not responding to sort of what it is. And so the idea that they have ownership over his sort of sovereignty to make choices is a curious reflection, I think, of people at large. And also, I think it's interesting that you get diverse interpretations out there. Not everybody's seeing it the same way. There's some divisions in how people are reacting.
Yeah, and I mean, Professor, it seems like a really galvanizing moment, too. I mean, as much as Donald Trump will tweet about the fact that, Canada would love to have him as president and we would like to be the 51st state, I haven't met anyone yet who really is on side with that. Just the fact that this is happening and that, Gretzky has worn the Maple Leaf so proudly and done so much for Canada, Canadian hockey in particular, but again, sort of made his home in the U.S. It's like, is everyone kind of going, oh, wait a sec, maybe he's more a fan of the Americans than we ever thought before? Like, are we revising our image of Gretzky?
Well, maybe you got to understand maybe we're only in the first period here. There's still a couple periods to go, and it may even go to overtime. So I'd reserve judgment because I think one thing that he clearly has is Trump's ear. And one of the things Trump said, I believe yesterday, I can't keep track, it changes so quickly, is the idea that Gretzky wants Canada to stay Canada. He's the one that's like, he's the only Canadian that I know of that seems to have Trump thinking very actively and publicly about our sovereignty. And so I think I'd like to have Gretzky on my team's bench, and I'm going to wait and see before I pass judgment on him.
Yeah. On that, do you think we are going to hear from him? I mean, so many people weighing in. Obviously, the president saying here's how he feels. Now his wife. Canadians have been very vocal, especially online. Do you think there's a chance he'll respond here?
I don't think he really wants to. And so I imagine he's taking his time out and thinking about it carefully here. I think there's a really simple explanation. He knows those guys. He probably coached some of these guys once upon a time, or had mentorship talks on both sides of the benches, right? And so I think he's being true to himself. And I think that's also kind of what you have to respect here, is that he's being true to yourself. And when you want to have the same courtesy extended to you, when he does come around, he may try to reinforce his brand points. But I think it's good to sort of let other people do the talking on his behalf for a while.
Like you said, it's very on brand for Gretzky. It's really interesting to watch. Assistant Professor Michael Mulvey with the University of Ottawa's Telfer School of Management. Really appreciate you joining us this morning. This is definitely some water cooler talk right now. So thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate the opportunity, Nick and Courtney.
Okay, absolutely.
Thank you.